Welcome back to the deep dive. If you've ever felt like financial planning requires some kind of specialized degree, today's deep dive is, well, it's your definitive shortcut.
It is. We are basically opening up the financial blueprint that underpins real sustainable wealth building.
That's right. Today, we are getting laser focused on the foundational core of your financial life. We're talking net worth and cash management planning.
And our mission today is pretty simple. We want to take these complex, sometimes, really intimidating concepts and just distill them into actionable, crystal clear steps. We'll be using specific formulas and some really great real-world client examples from our planning sources.
The idea is that you walk away from this understanding not just what these terms mean, but, and this is the important part, precisely how to apply them to your own life.
We're really moving beyond the theory today and getting into the actual mechanics of financial health.
Exactly. And we have 4 core objectives that are going to guide this conversation. By the end of this, you'll understand how to create and, more importantly, accurately analyze a net worth statement.
Mm-hmm.
We'll also describe the essential components of a robust, comprehensive financial plan, break down how to create and analyze a working cash flow statement, and then finally, show you how to build a disciplined savings plan that's tailored to your most important goals.
And these statements, there's so much more than just numbers on a page. They are the diagnostic tools. They reveal where you're vulnerable, where you're excelling, and most importantly, what path you really need to take to secure your future.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the absolute foundational piece, net worth.
Right.
We hear this term thrown around all the time, but what is its true functional definition in the world of financial planning?
Well, the definition is deceivingly simple, but it's also profoundly powerful. Net worth is just the difference between your total assets, so everything you own, and your total liabilities.
Everything you own.
Everything you owe. And it applies universally, whether you're an individual, a family, or even a massive corporation.
And crucially, it is, like the name implies, a snapshot. It's a precise reading of your financial position taken at a specific date, right?
Exactly. It doesn't capture the income you earned yesterday or what you spent last month. It is a single photograph of your immediate financial standing.
A photograph. I like that. So what's the long-term goal with this number?
The primary goal for any financial plan is, well, simple, to improve that net worth statement over time. We aren't looking for daily fluctuations or anything like that.
Right, you're not checking it like the stock market?
No. We're looking for a consistent, positive trend measured year over year. We're often tracking progress over a 5 or even a 10-year period. It's what confirms that the financial strategies you've put in place are, actually working.
So why do we dedicate so much energy to tracking this one number? Why not just track, say, your bank balance? Our sources outline 4 pretty specific reasons why this kind of focused net worth planning is so essential.
Well, first, it enforces financial discipline. The mere act of compiling all the data forces you to confront your entire financial reality. All of it.
No hiding.
No hiding.
Yeah.
Second, it allows you to determine a strategy for a future target. If you know your current net worth is, say, $100,000, you can actually plot the steps and the growth rate you need to hit a bigger goal, like a retirement target of $1.5 million.
Okay, so it gives you a starting line. And the third reason?
The third is that it lets you measure financial progress on a regular basis. Are you actually moving toward that goal? Are your investment returns doing what they're supposed to be doing?
And the fourth. And this one feels like it's often the most important for just, peace of mind.
It really is. It helps establish a profound sense of financial security about the future, simply because the evidence of your progress is right there. It's quantifiable.
Okay, so to move from just defining it to actually calculating it, you have to start with a formal financial plan, which means a pretty comprehensive document gathering process. This is where the rubber meets the road. It's not just a quick glance at your checking account. What specific records are required to build a truly accurate picture?
Okay, you're going to need your recent tax records, real estate closing documents, comprehensive bank statements, and this one's important, your property insurance policies.
Why the insurance policies?
Because they're crucial for estimating the fair market value of your personal assets, like your house or your car. You'll also need loan schedules, full credit card information, detailed brokerage and mutual fund records, and any pension statements.
And the final piece?
The final critical piece is having itemized records of your living expenses and mortgage payments. This is what will feed into the cash flow side of the planning, which we'll get to later.
That sounds like a whole weekend of just digging through filing cabinets.
It can be, but you only have to do it once to get started.
Okay, so once we have this mountain of data, how do we structure it? We need to categorize everything into assets and liabilities.
Right. Assets are what you own, and we break them down into three types. First are your liquid assets. This is cash, or things you can convert to cash really quickly without a penalty. Think your checking and savings accounts.
Simple enough.
Then you have your investment assets, which are held for appreciation or income. We categorize those as either short-term or long-term. And finally, you have your personal assets, things like your primary residence, a cottage, or your vehicles.
And it's really important to get the valuation of those personal assets right, isn't it? A financial statement will usually value a house at its current market price, but something like a car or furniture, that's valued based on fair market value.
Which often means a pretty significant discount from what you paid for it thanks to depreciation.
Right.
Precisely. Then on the other side of the ledger, you have your liabilities, everything you owe. These are simply categorized as short-term, like credit card debt or a line of credit, or long-term debt, like a mortgage or, big student loans.
Now, what happens if we do all this math? We complete the calculation, and the total on the liability side is actually greater than the fair value of the asset side.
That specific and very critical financial state is called insolvency.
Insolvency.
It means your net worth is negative. The total amount you owe to creditors is more than the total fair market value of everything you own. It signifies a financial inability to meet your obligations, and it requires immediate aggressive financial intervention.
To make this process a bit more tangible, let's look at a detailed example from our sources. Tim and Ellen Morn. They went to an advisor, Fiona Silva, to establish their starting line. Let's break down their snapshot.
Okay, so the Morans are in the early stages of accumulation. Their advisor first totaled up their assets, and right away she saw they had a fairly low liquid reserve, only $2,000 in their bank accounts.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Their investment assets were modest, but they were growing. They had $32,000 in registered retirement savings plans, or RRSPs, and some GICs.
And just a quick clarity note for everyone. Since we're using Canadian source material here, an RRSP is a tax-advantaged account for retirement savings, kind of like a 401k or an IRA in the U.S. And a GIC is essentially a guaranteed low-risk term deposit.
Thank you. That's a great clarification.
Yeah.
So their largest asset, not surprisingly, was their personal asset, their house, which was valued at $200,000. So the Morn family's total assets sum up to $234,000.
Okay, now for the flip side, their debt load.
Their liabilities were definitely heavy on the long-term side. Their outstanding mortgage liability stood at $125,000. They also carried a small, short-term liability, $1,200 outstanding on a credit card.
So that brings their total liabilities to $126,200.
Correct.
So the final crucial calculation is the net worth. Total assets, 234, minus total liabilities, 126.2. That gives the Morans a current quantifiable net worth of $107,800.
And this number, this is their baseline. Fiona Silva, their advisor, she uses this $107,800 to measure their progress toward their really substantial long-term goal, which is accumulating $1.5 million for retirement. Without this precise starting figure, planning and monitoring become, well, impossible.
But a raw number like $107,800 doesn't really tell the whole story, does it? The true analytical power comes when we start comparing the components of the statement against each other. And this is where financial ratios come in as these amazing diagnostic tools.
Financial ratios are, they're indispensable. They quickly identify structural problem areas, they assess your general financial health, and they dictate how your resources should be managed more effectively. But they're not standalone metrics.
What do you mean?
Well, they have to be evaluated alongside non-financial factors like how marketable your skills are, the stability of your income, and where you are in your life cycle.
Let's dive into the 4 key ratios we need to focus on, starting with the first indicator of stability, liquidity.
Right. Ratio 1, the basic liquidity ratio. This estimates exactly how many months a client could cover their monthly expenses using only their existing cash assets after taxes. The formula is simple. Liquid assets divided by monthly expenses.
So this is basically the emergency buffer calculation. The standard guideline is that you absolutely must aim to build an emergency fund that's equivalent to 3 to 6 months of living expenses. If your ratio is less than 3, you are in a pretty risky position.
Definitely. And moving from that survival ratio to an allocation ratio, we look at ratio 2, the liquid assets to total assets ratio. This measures the amount of highly liquid cash reserves you have relative to your total accumulated wealth. The formula is liquid assets divided by total assets.
And the guideline for this one is typically 5 to 15%. So if you're at, say, 20 or 30%, you probably have way too much money just sitting idle in a low-interest savings account. Your money isn't being used efficiently for growth.
Exactly. But on the other hand, an older client with a very stable pension income might only need 3 to 5% because their income flow is so predictable. It's all about context.
Okay, next we shift focus to accumulation with ratio 3, the investment assets to net worth ratio.
This one compares the value of assets you hold specifically for growth like stocks, or RRSPs, relative to your net worth. So the formula is investment assets divided by net worth.
And this ratio is super dynamic based on age, right? For younger clients in their 20s or 30s, this is often less than 20% because their net worth is all tied up in their mortgage or maybe an early business.
But for older clients, especially those approaching retirement, the target should be more than 50%. This signifies that the majority of their wealth is now in productive, income-generating accounts, not in, depreciating assets or illiquid personal property.
And finally, we analyze the structure of their obligations using ratio 4, the debt-to-asset ratio.
This one reflects the proportion of your total assets that have been financed by debt. In other words, how much of what you own is really owed to someone else? The formula is just total debts divided by total assets.
As with the other ratios, your life cycle stage is key here. Younger clients often have a really high debt ratio, maybe over 50%, because of huge student loans, business startup costs, or that first big mortgage.
But as they age, especially by the time they hit their late 50s, the goal is to drive that ratio down sharply. You're really targeting less than 20% by the time you enter retirement.
Okay, let's put the Mourn family's data under this analytical lens and see what red flags pop up immediately. So, total assets, $234,000. Total liabilities, $126,200.
Their liquid assets to total assets ratio was $2,000 divided by $234,000. That result is 0.85%.
So, essentially 1%.
1%. And that is a critical structural failure. It is 10 times lower than the most conservative recommended range.
Wow. So, what does that actually mean in real life?
It means that if the Morneys were to have an unexpected $5,000 expense, say their furnace dies, or there's a sudden medical bill, they would immediately have to put that on their credit card, which just compounds their high-interest debt. Or worse, they might have to liquidate a small portion of their RRSPs, and that means tax penalties and permanently undermining their long-term growth.
So that one tiny percentage point paints a picture of extreme financial fragility. Their advisor, Fiona, she knows that before they can even start talking about retirement goals, she has to focus exclusively on cash flow adjustments to build up that crucial emergency fund.
Exactly. Now let's look at their debt-to-asset ratio. That's $126,200 divided by $234,000, which gives us 54%.
Which, given that they're early in their accumulation phase and carrying a big mortgage, that 54% is pretty typical.
It's typical, but it highlights the need for a focused mortgage reduction strategy over the next decade. The ratios just provide these immediate, quantifiable areas for action that a simple net worth number completely hides.
So once we have the baseline of diagnostic ratios, we need to understand what actually drives the net worth forward or backward.
Right. Net worth can increase through two main pathways. First is through the purchase of assets that have the potential to appreciate in value. So buying real estate, purchasing stocks, or investing in a business.
And the second way is through an increase in the value of the assets you already have.
Which could be organic, like, positive returns on your investments, or it could be tactical, like doing high-return home renovations that increase the fair market value of your house.
Okay, and on the flip side, how does net worth decrease?
Well, also two main pathways. The first is the sale of assets, where the cash you get is immediately used for consumption. So if you sell off a chunk of your mutual fund to pay for a vacation, you've just reduced your investment assets without getting an appreciating asset to balance it out.
And the final factor that decreases net worth is an increase in liabilities. So borrowing money for consumption, like taking out a boat loan or carrying big credit card balances.
Exactly. You've increased your debt without acquiring an asset that reliably appreciates.
It's really useful for people to visualize their net worth trend over a typical life cycle. Our sources detail 3 classic profiles.
Let's start with the profile of a 30-year-old dentist. Their asset column looks pretty complex. They've got a professional practice, a house, some investments. But their liability column is arguably even larger and more diverse.
They've likely got heavy student loans, right?
Heavy student loans, a business loan to equip their practice, maybe an investment loan used strategically, and of course a large mortgage. This stage is just defined by high debt that facilitates rapid asset building.
Okay, now let's jump ahead to the 45-year-old dual income couple.
Here, their assets have matured. The house is significantly paid down, they might have a cottage, and they should be maxing out their retirement accounts, like RSPs, and their education savings accounts, RESPs.
And their liabilities are more streamlined now. Probably just the primary mortgage and maybe a car loan. They're in the heavy accumulation phase, balancing debt reduction against aggressive savings for the future.
Exactly. And finally, the retired 60-year-old couple. This is the goal state. Their assets are substantial. They're diversified between property, RRSPs, and other income-generating investments. Critically, their liabilities are typically zero or minimal.
So the financial focus has completely shifted from accumulation and debt repayment to managing income flow and preserving capital.
That's it.
So the assessment of net worth growth is only useful if it dictates concrete strategies. And the specific strategy you deploy depends on how the current year's growth rate compares to your target.
Absolutely. If the annual rate of growth meets the specified target, great. The client should just continue their existing strategies to maintain that momentum. If it's working, don't fix it.
And if the rate of growth falls short,
Then the advisor has to devise improved, maybe more aggressive investment or saving strategies to accelerate that rate of growth. And crucially, they might also need to set a more realistic net worth goal if the initial target was, just unattainable given the client's income and saving capacity.
and what if the analysis reveals that the net worth is actually declining or worse is negative? What if you're insolvent?
That calls for emergency action. The strategies have to focus on developing more aggressive approaches to debt reduction and expense cutting. This might mean renegotiating loans, exploring debt consolidation, or radically reducing discretionary spending. You also have to explore strategies for getting higher, yet still appropriate, investment returns, and potentially revising the entire set of life goals to align with the current reality.
So the net worth statement provides the snapshot. Now we need to transition to the dynamic roadmap, which is the comprehensive financial plan. It takes that initial data and projects it forward with actionable steps across every single domain of your financial life.
A comprehensive plan is holistic because it has to focus on prioritizing the client's specific objectives, not just generic things like save more money. It uses that initial net worth assessment to analyze all the assets and liabilities, and it looks for critical opportunities.
Opportunities like debt consolidation, maximizing savings, enhancing investment returns.
Addressing insurance gaps and utilizing tax reduction strategies, all of it.
Our sources identify 6 interlocking planning elements that have to be addressed within any comprehensive plan, and we need to walk through them because if you neglect any one of these, the whole plan is incomplete.
Right. Element 1. Cash flow and debt management. This is the immediate operational level. It involves establishing the emergency fund, setting up saving programs, and assessing all your debt ratios and capacity. It's all about ensuring stability.
Okay. Element 2, investment planning.
This assesses your total portfolio composition, making sure you have appropriate diversification across asset classes, and critically, verifying the tax efficiency of the investments you hold. This is where strategic asset allocation is really determined.
Element 3, retirement planning.
This involves calculating and ensuring the right levels of contributions to tax-advantaged accounts, like RRSPs or other registered pension plans, and then mapping out the anticipated in-bank flow you'll need during your retirement years.
Element 4 is risk management and insurance planning. This is the protective layer.
It is. It ensures you have adequate income replacement protection, general liability coverage for your assets, and sufficient life or disability insurance to cover major liabilities and provide for your dependents if, a catastrophe happens.
Element 5, tax planning and education funding.
This focuses on maximizing contributions to specific funds like RISPs and RESPs, using strategies like income splitting between spouses to lower the family's overall tax burden and ensuring the entire investment portfolio is managed in the most tax-efficient way possible.
And finally, element 6, estate planning.
This assesses how your assets and liabilities are currently owned, determines the process for transferring property, and addresses gifting strategies to ensure the efficient, tax-minimized distribution of your assets to your beneficiaries when you die.
And these 6 elements are all interconnected, right? A change in one, say, reducing your debt frees up cash flow, which then immediately impacts your investment and retirement planning.
Absolutely. They all work together, and when you're building the plan, You have to differentiate between statements that reflect the past and those that define the future.
Right. So the current net worth statement is that static snapshot assets and liabilities at a specific date. And the current cash flow statement gives us the historical data and overview of past income and spending, usually over the last year. They tell us where we started.
But the actual strategic work relies entirely on the projected statements. The projected net worth statement is the primary tool we use to measure future progress. It's how we model what your net worth will be in 3 years, 5 years, or 20 years, assuming you follow specific savings, investment, and debt repayment schedules.
And the projected cash flow statement is really the engine of the whole plan. It's the tool you use to generate a deliberate cash flow surplus and then optimize how that surplus gets allocated to achieve your prioritized goals.
Let's just revisit the Morney family to show the power of this analysis. Remember, Tim had $28,000 in RSP savings, but Ellen only had $4,000. Fiona Silva, their advisor, recognized that this disparity, plus Tim's higher income, created a massive opportunity.
So she identified that by leveraging the tax code, they could set up a spousal RRSP for Ellen. This allows Tim to contribute to Ellen's retirement account, but claim the deduction on his higher personal income.
And that immediately reduces their total household tax burden. At the same time, it lets them better use the concept of income splitting in retirement, where income is drawn from both accounts at lower tax brackets. This one single action uses tax planning to improve both their net worth and their retirement cash flow projections. It's a huge win.
So based on analyzing net worth and identifying structural opportunities like the Morin's tax issue, what are the standard strategies that are universally applicable to improve anyone's financial position?
Well, the list is focused, but it's highly impactful.
Sure.
First, and this is non-negotiable for anyone carrying consumer debt, reduce or eliminate high-interest credit card debt completely. The interest rate bleed in this category just undermines every other financial strategy you have.
Okay. Secondly, if you have a bunch of small debts at high rates, you should consolidate those loans.
Often, a single lower-interest personal loan or a line of credit can roll up several of those smaller high-interest obligations, which simplifies your payments and drastically reduces the overall interest you're paying.
Third, focus on reducing or eliminating non-tax deductible loans, like your primary home mortgage or a car loan. These are paid with after-tax dollars, which makes them really financially inefficient.
And that leads right into the fourth point. Utilize strategic borrowing, where the loan interest is tax deductible. This is often done by borrowing funds to invest in non-registered income-producing assets. But, and this is a big caveat,
Right.
clients have to be acutely aware that this strategy is relatively risky. You have to weigh the potential for higher returns against the risk of magnifying your investment losses.
Okay, fifth strategy.
If you've cleared all that high-interest debt, increase your savings and maximize your contributions to tax-advantaged accounts like RRSPs and RESPs to leverage all those tax benefits offered by the government.
And finally, once those registered accounts are maxed out, you can begin investing in non-registered assets and adjust your overall asset mix toward more growth-oriented assets to accelerate appreciation and build net worth faster.
So if net worth is the snapshot, the cash flow statement is the operational engine. It's the movie showing every single dollar moving through your system over a period, usually a year.
And cash management is so critical because it forces a confrontation with reality. It reveals the precise sources of your cash inflows and the pattern of your cash outflows, your expenditures. It reveals the surplus or often the uncomfortable shortfall.
Let's look at the income side first. Your income sources have to be analyzed for both their level and their stability. Are they salaried or commission-based? Are they fixed or are they variable?
Typical sources of income would include your regular salary or wages, investment income like dividends and interest, government payouts, business income, things like that. And assessing the stability is crucial, right? A salaried job income is predictable, but a business owner's income is inherently more volatile and demands a much larger liquidity buffer.
It does. Then we tackle the outflow side, the expenditure data. This is where the behavioral analysis really comes in. We cluster the spending and we divide it into two critical categories. Non-discretionary spending, so basic necessary expenses you have to pay, and discretionary spending.
The optional stuff that can be cut or controlled.
Exactly. The detailed clusters we look at for non-discretionaries include housing costs, so mortgage or rent, utilities, food and groceries, transportation, healthcare, debt reduction payment, and childcare. These are usually fixed or necessary.
And the discretionary clusters are where the opportunity is. Things like personal grooming, leisure activities, clothing, dining out, miscellaneous spending.
Right. And analyzing each cluster, not just the dollar amount, but the percentage of your total expenditure it consumes, that allows an advisor to immediately pinpoint where clients can adjust their spending behavior to create a surplus. But it requires brutal honesty from the client.
So the current cash flow statement is history. The projected cash flow statement is the future strategy. Its only purpose is to create a realistic, workable plan that allocates your future cash flows to specific, prioritized targets.
Now, the process of creating the strategic statement moves through three distinct, iterative planning stages.
Okay, so stage one, the first draft. The initial goal here is to identify and curb discretionary spending excesses and ensure you have enough short-term liquidity. For clients with low savings, the immediate priority is always creating that emergency fund.
hmm So if dining out or entertainment makes up 20% of their spending, the advisor has to propose a target ceiling to bring that under control.
Okay. Stage two, the planning draft.
Once you've established some control, we identify and allocate the cash flow surplus to specific goals. We slot money into short-term goals, like a vacation fund, medium-term goals, like education savings, and long-term goals, like retirement investments. This allocation has to be a direct reflection of the client's life priorities.
In stage three, the revised draft, this is the final, realistic, workable document.
Yes. Here we adjust the expense estimates based on real constraints, and then we formally allocate that final reliable surplus cash flow into automated savings and investment programs, making sure the funds flow directly to the client's prioritized objectives. This stage demands that the client commits to the required behavioral changes.
And since financial resources are always limited, where that surplus cash is directed is absolutely crucial. This relies on three key principles of effective cash flow allocation.
Principle 1, effective debt management. We already touched on this, but it's the immediate priority. 1, pay off the costliest debt first, which is almost always high-interest consumer debt.
Right.
2, strategically convert non-tax deductible debt to tax deductible debt when it's appropriate. And 3, increase the frequency or the amounts of your debt payments to accelerate principal reduction and reduce the overall interest you pay.
Principle 2, prioritization of savings. This is the foundational behavioral shift. Pay yourself first.
That's the one. Savings targets are set and treated as a non-discretionary fixed expense, automatically deducted from your paychecks or bank accounts before you even see the money. Any subsequent windfalls or surplus funds should be immediately deployed toward lump sum contributions. You start small, maybe 5% of your net income, and then you aggressively build that percentage up over time.
And principle 3, effective allocation of cash reserves, the liquidity piece.
Right. Cash reserves have to serve two distinct functions. First, you allocate funds specifically for the emergency fund. That's your 3 to 6 months of liquid assets. Second, you allocate cash reserves to a separate sinking fund to meet periodic large purchases like next year's vacation, holiday expenses, or the down payment for a future car.
And that segregation prevents unexpected major expenses from derailing your long-term investment strategy.
Precisely.
Let's apply this strategic process to Paul and Gina Bedford. They had two major intertwined problems: $3,000 in outstanding high-interest debt and over $21,000 in unused RRSP contribution room. Their goal was growth, but their current cash flow just didn't allow for it.
The first piece of good news was that Gina's salary was projected to increase from $38,000 to $40,000, while Paul's stayed at $50,000. This, plus some minor tax changes, meant their total net income was projected to increase by $6,650 in the next year.
Which is a great start, but it's not enough on its own to solve their problems.
Absolutely not. The $6,650 needed to be allocated, but their debt problem was urgent, and their retirement savings gap was massive. Their advisor, Fiona, knew they needed to initiate significant behavioral cuts to accelerate the process.
And the strategy focused on dramatically reducing discretionary expenses. Let's look at the actual painful cuts that were implemented. They reduced their dining out expenses by $900 a year. They cut entertainment and recreation costs by $1,000.
And this is the most insightful cut. They reduced furniture and appliance spending by a massive $4,300.
Wow.
This single cut tells us a lot about their prior spending habits. They were prioritizing immediate gratification, a new couch or a new TV, over their future financial security. The advisor negotiated this hard commitment. They also streamlined non-discretionary debt, cutting their annual credit card payment charges from $624 to $240 through consolidation.
And by making these substantial cuts, they freed up a huge block of cash. And this allowed them to restructure their savings allocation. Their previous year's RRSP contributions were only $2,400.
But their projected contributions for the following year jumped to $10,600. That's an astonishing increase of $8,200.
That creates a powerful snowball effect. The total reduction in discretionary spending was around $6,200. You add that to the $6,650 income increase, and you factor in the tax refund they'll get from the increased RRSP contributions.
And the Bedfords are projected to achieve a whopping cash flow surplus of $7,580 in the projected year.
And that surplus is the key. It allows them to aggressively address that $3,000 high-interest debt immediately and maintain a high level of retirement savings. It just demonstrates that meticulous cash management, coupled with real behavioral change, creates a huge financial impact, and quickly. They didn't just earn more, they allocated smarter.
Your cash flow requirements and your allocation strategy change completely depending on where you are in life.
In the early stage, say 25 to 35, the reality is often that your expenses slightly exceed your income, especially if you're pursuing education or starting a professional practice.
And the action required here is constant negotiation. You're making conscious trade-offs between consumption spending now and savings for the future, trying to prioritize both short and long-term objectives.
Then in the middle stage, the peak earning years, the goal state is achieved. Income significantly exceeds expenses.
And the action shifts entirely. It's now about managing the complexity of your investments, maximizing your retirement contributions, and managing capital growth aggressively.
And finally, in the late stage retirement, your employment or business income stops.
And the action moves to managing your pension and investment cash flows, ensuring the wealth you've accumulated is generating a stable, reliable income stream that meets your spending needs without, prematurely depleting your capital base.
Okay, we've established the snapshot with net worth and the engine with cash flow. Now, we need to translate those vague desires like, I want to save for a down payment, into quantifiable, achievable objectives. And that's through savings planning.
Savings planning requires the use of a formal goal-setting worksheet. This is the necessary bridge between just having a desire and having a mathematical reality.
And the process involves 3 essential steps. First, you set specific, realistic goals, not just save more, but save $50,000 for a down payment. Second, you specify the total amount, the future value you need to finance that goal.
And third, you use financial mathematics to calculate the precise monthly payment required to achieve that goal in the desired time frame.
And the only way to calculate that specific required monthly payment is with a sophisticated financial calculator or the detailed periodic payment, or PMT, formula. This is one of the most powerful tools in financial planning.
It is. The formula calculates the required monthly savings. It's PMT equals FV divided by a more complicated term in brackets.
Let's make sure we define these critical variables clearly because they're the inputs you have to supply. So PMT is the payment, or the required monthly savings. FV is the future value, the total dollar amount you want to save. N is the number of periods, usually months, over which you are saving.
And ACV is perhaps the trickiest input. It's the expected after-tax interest rate per period. And you have to use the after-tax rate because most savings aren't held in tax-sheltered vehicles, so you have to account for taxes reducing your actual return. And you have to be realistic about this return. You can't just plug in 10% if you plan to save in a standard high-interest savings account.
Okay, let's use the example of Edgar and Constance Manfred to see this formula in action. Their goal is substantial. Save $50,000 over 10 years, so 120 months, for their daughter's education. They anticipate a modest, realistic after-tax return of 3% compounded interest.
So when their advisor plugs these numbers in future value of $50,000 and of 120 months, and I, which is 0.03 divided by 12, the calculated monthly payment required is precisely $357.80.
And that number transforms a distant wish into a mandatory monthly financial commitment. It just removes the ambiguity entirely.
It does.
So knowing the required monthly payment is one thing, but implementing the behavioral strategies to actually meet it is what separates successful savers from unsuccessful ones.
The first strategy is just to ensure that the goals are genuinely realistic. They should be challenging, but not impossible. If you're already living paycheck to paycheck, you should probably avoid setting annual savings goals that exceed 20% of your income, because that often just leads to burnout and failure.
And secondly, we have to return to the most fundamental rule of all. Pay yourself first.
You have to. You treat that $357.80 payment for Edgar and Constance as a non-discretionary fixed expense, just like their electricity bill. If savings are treated as what's left over after spending, well, human nature dictates that nothing will ever be left over.
Third, you have to eliminate the temptation entirely by setting up an automatic savings plan.
Yes. Arrange for that calculated payment amount to be automatically deducted from your paycheck or bank account directly into the savings or investment vehicle. This applies whether it's a dividend reinvestment plan, a mutual fund purchase, or just a simple high-interest savings transfer.
Fourth, adopt a savings-first mindset in all your purchase decisions. Avoid those unnecessary credit card purchases. By saving the interest charges you'd incur from borrowing and at the same time benefiting from your invested savings, you capture this massive dual financial benefit. You're avoiding losses and generating gains.
And finally, incorporate a sense of reward. Use the eventual realization of the savings goal, the education funding, the early retirement, the down payment, as a tangible delayed reward for maintaining that long-term discipline. That mental connection is what sustains the effort.
We've stressed the importance of the emergency fund, that 3 to 6 months of expenses. But this fund is structurally different from your long-term investment savings, and it requires specific characteristics.
The two key characteristics are paramount. One, the money must be readily accessible in a short time frame, usually within 24 to 48 hours. Two, its value must not fluctuate with the volatile changes in interest rates or the stock market. Safety and stability trump return here.
Okay, so what kind of liquid, stable funds meet these requirements?
It's a specific list. High-interest savings accounts, which offer slightly better rates than basic accounts, cashable guaranteed investment certificates, or GICs, or money market funds. You are absolutely trading growth potential for capital preservation.
And what if a client just doesn't have sufficient cash reserves? Are there alternative sources of emergency funding?
There are, but they should be used cautiously. This could include a pre-arranged home equity loan, which gives you access to capital based on the equity in your home, or a permanent life insurance policy, where you can borrow against or withdraw the policy's cash surrender value.
Now, we absolutely must address the critical cautionary tale, which involves the Registered Retirement Savings Plan, the RRSP. This is a common and often disastrous mistake people make.
It is. Advisors universally warn against using RRSP savings as a source of emergency funds, even if the money is technically available. The act of withdrawing from an RRSP for a non-qualifying purpose has two immediate devastating effects. First, it permanently undermines your long-term retirement assets and lifestyle by halting that tax-deferred compounding growth.
And second, there are immediate tax consequences. The financial institution is legally required to withhold federal income tax, typically ranging from 10 to 30% depending on the amount, right at the time of withdrawal. That money is gone instantly.
Let's use the painful example of Lydia Valletta. Lydia was unemployed for 11 months, and having exhausted all of her liquid savings, she had to withdraw $5,000 from her RRSP just to cover basic living costs.
And the bank immediately withheld 10%, so $500 in taxes. She only received $4,500.
Right, and not only did she lose that $500 immediately, but the entire $5,000 withdrawal was added to her income for the year, potentially pushing her into a higher tax bracket if she found a job later. But most importantly, she lost the long-term benefit of that $5,000, continuing to compound and grow tax-deferred until retirement.
And that sacrifice of future stability for current needs is precisely why the emergency fund has to be held in safe, liquid, non-tax-advantaged accounts.
We covered a really comprehensive overview today, focusing on the essential tools you need to run your financial life like a successful business.
We did. We defined the net worth statement as your financial snapshot, a critical, precise measure of assets minus liabilities. We showed how the cash flow statement acts as the operational engine, detailing that crucial flow of income and expenditures. And remember, the projected statements are the strategic planning tools. They're the roadmap.
And don't underestimate the power of those financial ratios. They are the key diagnostic indicators that reveal structural weakness, whether it's the Morin's terrifyingly low liquidity ratio, the Bedford's excessive discretionary spending, or an inappropriate debt load for your life stage. Financial health really relies on the disciplined application of those three principles of cash flow: effective debt reduction, prioritizing savings through automation, and maintaining robust, segregated cash reserves.
The construction of a financial plan is never a static document. It's dynamic. The strategies we discussed, From using spousal accounts for tax efficiency to the painful but necessary cuts made by Paul and Gina Bedford, they have to be implemented, monitored, and adjusted continuously. The goal remains constant. Continuously increase your assets and systematically decrease your liabilities.
And that behavioral habit of pay yourself first is often the hardest one to establish. We've seen why planning for an emergency requires accessible, liquid funds outside of your crucial, tax-advantaged retirement accounts like RRSPs. And given the natural temptation to dip into savings when immediate goals feel challenging, this leaves us with one provocative thought for you to consider this week.
If the key to long-term success is automation and discipline, how can you structure your financial environment today to psychologically make savings non-negotiable and actively discourage or even penalize early withdrawal from funds intended for your future self? Think about the architecture of your bank accounts and your investment platform. Making your savings hard to access is often the best defense against your own impulsive decisions.
That's your challenge. Thanks for diving deep with us.